Welcome everyone to Caster Calls episode 45. Here I am with fighting game pro commentator SaintCola. I did try and go through your reel and YouTube videos and tried to actually collect all the fighting games that you do, but I'm certain I might have missed something. So I'm excited to talk to you about the fighting game scene as a whole, but I'll go ahead and let yourself introduce you and your many years, I suppose, to doing fighting games.
You're definitely right. There's a lot of games that I that I deal with. But I've been around the scene for a while. Despite my my beautiful face, I am 34 years old. I am old. When I get up, my back hurts. Okay, so I definitely, despite looking like a teenager, I'm an old man. I've been in the scene for a while, but I was never really like out there physically a lot. I would be on the Sure You Can forums a lot. I'd be on other forums, IRC, things like that. So I communicated to the scene that way, and that's how I was, able to like talk to people and stuff like that. I wasn't really having a big scene out in Peoria, Illinois. That wasn't, we really had out there. But I did have a lot of arcades. We did Aladdin's arcade and stuff like that, and that's how I really got into fighting games. Was going to Aladdin's arcade in the mall and hanging out with friends, playing Champion Edition and stuff like that. Later on, hating Street Fighter 3, Third Strike, and stuff like that. Uh, Throughout the years, I just like never got a chance to leave. And then finally, around 2010, I left Peoria to go to Chicago. And some of the reason was just to have more opportunities, more jobs, and things like that for school. But a small part of it was so I can get to like a bigger scene. And Chicago was the closest one for that. And so I traveled out there into Chicago, where I now reside for have been so for almost over a decade now. And it just was eye opening because people were playing various video games and things like that, fighting games, I should say. The scene was popping. There's like places to go and hang out with, and I wouldn't go out to a lot of locals consistently. I go out like maybe every so often, like a monthly or something like that. Just to play some fighting games and leave. Like I slowly started integrating myself in the scene. Shouts to Kevin Fair. He had a lot of great tournaments all around Chicago. And then eventually there was, just a moment where I was at the Ignite fighting game meetups, where it's like the one of the more like localized ones, more consistent ones, for the locals in Chicago. And I looked over and I was like, they're talking about fighting games, they're commentating it. And I was like, that's super cool. I've always wanted to do that, but I was like, I was a little too shaky. I didn't really know how to get into the whole thing. And it took me, I think it had to have been like 3 months to work up the nerve to talk to the streamleader. His name's Callisto, and he was so receptive. He's like, "Yeah, sure, get on." And that's kinda how my commentary career began. Like, it began with fighting games and loving them and finally going out in the scene, and then people being so welcoming and allowing me to be able to commentate and, start my career. It was terrible. My first time was awful. It was I'm not I hope the VODs aren't there. If they are, so please delete them because they were absolutely terrible. Like, my first probably year and a half was, it's you're growing pains. You got to get better. You see, you got to practice and stuff like that. So, um, I was not too good. So as I worked on it, Callisto gave me a lot of opportunities. Other people gave me opportunities too, as well, to commentate Street Fighter Five. I dabbled in Dragon Ball a little bit. I also dabbled in various other games here and there. I got into Grand Blue a lot when that came out. Um, and I was starting to really get into it. I was like, this is something I'm really passionate about. I really love this. I'm going out to my local and I'm like what you would call like a mic vulture. I'm like hovering around the area waiting for someone to get off the mic so I can get on. I'm just swooping in the skies. But I began to like, be consistent with it, and I really started loving it, started practicing it, started learning things, started watching things like Say James videos, who is a big pro commentator out there too as well, who started performing. And I just started like learning more of the tendencies of the commentators and things like that and putting it together. And one of my big opportunities was in 2018, I was able to do Red Bull Chicago for Street Fighter 5 and being able to commentate for my scene and do this what I thought, at least at the time, was a big event, was fantastic. And it was big in my mind because these are my people that I watch every single day. I commentate their stuff and I'm like, wow, this is what I want to do. Like, that was a day I was like, I want to do this forever. Like, I want to keep doing this. Like, if I got to spend thousands traveling around the world to just get a shot at doing some commentary, I'm going to do it. And then after in 2019, I got a big break, doing commentary for like majors and stuff, or not majors, well, regionals in our area. And then in 2020, at the beginning, there's a big tournament called Frosty Fostings. That was my biggest break, my biggest tournament that I'd done thus far. I'm just a little tadpole in this big old sea of commentators, and I'm like, dang, I actually get to do Frosty Fostings. I did the pools, and I was so happy. And I had plans to travel around the world. I had plans to, put some money aside and, just go out there and say, hey, can I be on the mic and stuff like that? And then COVID hit, uh, and it ruined a lot of stuff, ruined a lot of plans. Obviously, ruined a lot of things for people. And on the smaller end of things for me, or for everybody, I mean, for me, it ruined my plans to travel and compete. It ruined a lot of stuff for the FGC too, because we were
Mm,
forced to go online, and our online is not as strong as other games. Like people playing StarCraft and Overwatch and things like that, y'all have fantastic, fantastic internet. I'm sorry, LAN or internet battles, or whatever. Like LAN is not really a thing that you have to really worry about. It seems like you guys can run tournaments online and not have to worry about too much lag. For fighting games, we're not there yet. We're not there yet. So I was like, man, this is awful. Like my dream is put on hold. But then I was like, I just want to commentate no matter what. It doesn't really matter about getting big or whatever. Like, really, what matters is just, being hype on the mic. I really love fighting games. I want to bring that energy. If it's online, offline, it doesn't matter. I just want to, bring that energy. And so I started commentating a lot, a lot of online locals. Since everybody started moving to the online stuff, despite it being kind of shaky, I started moving to doing commentary for Wednesday Night Fights, which is a really big one in the West Coast. I started doing commentary for Salt Mine, which is in European uh, Street Fighter 5 and now Guilty Gear tournament series on the weekends. I just started anytime someone had a mic open, they just need somebody, I was there. And so I just popped on the mic everywhere. I just grinded. I learned about the game as much as possible. I just did it to have fun. I just wanted to, have that semblance of the fighting game community back with me. That thing that was lost, that has been taken away because we're all online and we're not able to be around each other. Because in the fighting game community, it's really about being by people. It's really about, being in this family oriented thing. Obviously, it has problems. We'll get into that later. But overall, like there's this big family unit that I felt like it's kind of taken away when you're not able to be by your homies and things like that. So after grinding and just doing it because I love it, right? And being able to at least work online to for for money and stuff like that, because these commentary jobs don't pay. That's just for for fun. Like I'll do 3 or 4 events a week, just for fun and for 4 hours, and all I get is a thanks, and that's okay. That's how it is in the FGC when you're starting. You're really out here just to get experience.
yeah.
Um, then I got hit up in the Discord during the Capcom Pro Tour while it was going on for Street Fighter 5. A couple months into it, I got hit up in the Discord by one of the tournament organizers. His name's Alex Valle. He was running that, and he was like, "Hey, you want to do the Capcom Cup Pro Tour? You want to do? I'm sorry, Capcom Pro Tour?" And I'm like, "He? This guy that just any mic that he sees, he just swoops on in." And he's like, "Yeah, I think you're ready." And that's when everything just kind of exploded. Like I did the commentary for the Capcom Pro Tour. I've done commentary for Grand Blue. I've done stuff. Actually, last year was when really got really big. I did Evo Online. I've done the Street Fighter Olympics, Tokyo Olympics that they had out there, the Intel World Open, which was ridiculous. Being able to be flown out to Poland for 30 days, that was insane to me because I've
Hmm.
never left the country. This is the first time leaving the country. Um, and just going out to various events and things like that, finally traveling or just doing big online events, like it just everything just snowballed. And I had started leaving my house around 2018 and 19, traveling to various tournaments. It wasn't to commentate, it was just to be there and play and maybe write articles for Red Bull and stuff like that. But now I'm having these opportunities to commentate there, to commentate alongside these big people like that I used to idolize, like Yipes, like Tasty Steve and stuff like that. Those people I used to see all the time. I'm like, man, I wish I was up there. I'm finally in that position, and it all just started from just that grind that I just didn't want to give up doing commentary.
That is quite the story. There's a lot to
There's a lot.
yeah, dissect in there, but that's awesome. Coming from a place of pure passion, basically, which to be fair, is a lot with esports, but it feels like even more so when it comes to the fighting game community, which
Mhm.
is another thing that we'll definitely get into. But yeah, like the first thing I guess that I'll get into is the fighting game community, as an actual community, right? That seems to be one of the biggest differences among like around the esports atmosphere is that these other esports, and this is going along with like that online versus offline thing, right?
Mhm.
Is that you guys, you're always together, you're always right next to each other, even when you're actually playing this game where all of us are very much used to like a ladder experience online. We're talking about Overwatch, Valorant, StarCraft, obviously Brood War, like it's CS:GO, like it's online more than it is necessarily in LAN. And
Mhm.
tiny, cool, super cool fact is that StarCraft 2 actually never even got LAN, even when we're right next to each
Wow.
other, we're online. But anyways, but that created such a cool environment for you guys. So how much would you say that the last 2 years of having to be online, do you think that there was any accommodation in the community and things have kind of shifted in a certain way? Or do you think it just kind of rubber banded, right? Everyone was forced to disperse. And then as soon as people were like, hey, it's offline again, guys, people were like right back to what fighting games were for the past couple of decades.
You know, I really feel like online has become a really strong component of the fighting game community, maybe more than we thought it was going to be. Before it was kind of an afterthought, but now we see the necessity of it. There are places where people don't get to travel; it's expensive and things like that. So now we see the the importance of having the ability to play people online when we're put in these positions. And to be honest, I feel like it's kind of a good thing because now I feel like it's also shifted to making the developers say, "We have to make sure that our online service is good." Like, delay-based netcode was a thing for a lot of fighting games, and
Hmm.
many of them really didn't have rollback, and if the rollback was there, it wasn't that good, and many developers are forced to say, "Well, now we have to make a decent product online because who knows what could happen." And there's a big base of people who don't get to leave their house, that really haven't left their house yet. Maybe they haven't had the ability, or, don't have the funds, or they just don't feel like they're ready yet, and having a good online infrastructure is super important. Now we see why, COVID has forced us into these positions where we have to play on in online tournaments. And to be honest, the FGC has done a good job themselves, as the players and the TOs and stuff like that, tournament organizers have done a really good job of like figuring out what to do. Okay, we have to pivot to online. How are we going to make our tournaments like this? Let's do something different instead of just doing a normal tournament. Sometimes we'll have team tournaments. Sometimes we'll have something different where, maybe invitationals and stuff like that. Those pivots were very important, and I'm really proud of the FGC for doing that, because it did look kind of dicey because we didn't know how long things were going, and everyone kind of picked up the ball and said, "Okay, we'll take care of it." Now, the developers in their games aren't always the best with it. There's some games that have like lobby issues and stuff still. There's some games that the online is still wonky, but the FGC just finds a way to adapt. And even if there's like lag and stuff like that, where it's like, okay, well, we'll just hope for a better connection next time. We'll play it through, and seeing people still want to play these fighting games, even though you don't have that humanistic element, like that you're by somebody, which creates a lot of stories, which has international competition, stuff like that, where we're mostly regional based, is really amazing. That being said, we have had some offline tournaments and they have been super hype. They've been great seeing people come out, and you can tell people are hungry for offline. But online you can still see it as like a thing. Like, for example, in LBC, they run Street Fighter 5 online and offline. They have two streams now. So not only have we have adapted, we've also kind of brought back, like brought more into it. Like, okay, online's important. Let's have online as well and offline too at the same time. So going out of COVID, I shouldn't say out of COVID, but as we get, things kind of slim down a little bit and we are able to go to more offline events, I think online's still gonna be important.
That's a pretty good perspective. I didn't even consider the what makes total sense, but that the developers themselves had to take another serious look at online, basically lag and latency and all that. So one of those weird bonuses, very quote unquote, about COVID. Um,
Yeah.
the other thing from like your introduction was that did you mention that you did something for a Japanese tournament in Street Fighter 5, but you went to Poland to do it? Did I hear that correctly?
So it wasn't a Japanese tournament, but it was for the Olympics.
Oh,
There
okay,
will
okay.
be a Japanese one this weekend though. That's probably the one that you're
Gotcha.
thinking of, because there's so many events going on. So it's definitely understandable. But I did go to Poland. I saw that you went to Katowice as well
Yeah, I
too.
did.
Did you not? Yes, ESL. Yep, that's where we went too. We
Ah,
actually
okay.
talked to some of the Rocket League people while we were out there last year. But we were out there for 30 days, hanging out, doing the Intel World Open for Street Fighter 5. which was super sick. We didn't get to see the players offline. They had to hold,
Mm.
again, regional based things, but they flew the commentators out there. The, they flew the majority of the commentators out there for the finale. For half of them, they did for the previous part of it. They just had half of them, but it was super fun. It was great being out there. ESL took really good care of us while we were out there. Definitely ate a lot of steaks. That's an inside joke, so FGC people will definitely catch that one. But it was a lot of fun. It had a lot of a really great time, and that was my first time leaving the US. And I'm going to tell you, I was very very nervous. I was like, "What am I doing?" But at the end, it was fun though. It was very fun.
Yeah. I mean, I imagine you had to go through all the COVID rules yourself.
Hmm.
Yeah, ESL didn't really necessarily give us a lot of help in that department. So there was a lot of like doing your own research, trying to figure out like what COVID tests you needed, and that's always super
Right?
fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's just like years ago there was, actually, funnily enough, yeah, the Olympics. There was the actual Pyeongchang Olympics that StarCraft 2 was kind of pushed in there a little bit.
Mm.
Um, and they flew me and a co-caster out to Poland to cast something that was happening in South Korea. It's a very
It's kind
very
of
odd.
wild, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but, no, that's obviously a very convenient place for ESL in particular. Now, does ESL actually do a lot of fighting games? Because I definitely was not under that impression.
they they do. So
Hmm,
like in the early days of Street Fighter 5, they had a bunch of cool tournaments and things like that, invitationals. I believe they were the ones running one of these. There's like a almost like a TV show type game show that they had. I believe ESL was at the helm of that. And they do various tournaments here and there, and they're also involved in the production for other things. I believe they're involved in parts of Evo 2 as well,
hmm.
Evo Online. Um, so ESL does do Street Fighter stuff or fighting game stuff, I should say. Maybe not as much as they used to, but last year was definitely a really big thing for them, so I hope they continue that.
Yeah, cool, okay. I know they have their hands in, like, a ton of different stuff, like mobile games, for instance, and they just announced, like, a big mobile game initiative, but,
Mhm.
yeah, I didn't realize I see so many fighting game tournaments, and it feels like at the very least the branding isn't as evident as perhaps like Dota, where it's called literally the ESL one or something like that.
Right.
So I was unaware, but that's awesome. So that leads into another question about the community and the organization of fighting games, which is that it does seem like everyone is willing to try a piece of the fighting game pie, if not actually
Mm.
just stay there and chomp on it all decade. Um, do you think that this has actually benefited the fighting game community, the amount of organizations that come in, or have you actually seen a bit of a fracture and you wish that there was more of a consolidation under like one publisher or one tournament organizer?
We are really grassroots. Like that's the basis. The basis of the fighting game community is, back in those dusty arcades with smoke billowing everywhere and stuff like that. People putting their quarters up. We come from that. Like in a lot of the effort in the FGC that you see, like even if it's like part of the production crew, they're FGC members. If there's somebody on the comms, they're FGC members. The people that play the games, they are in the community and things like that continuously. A lot of the stuff that you see in terms of productions and stuff like that are people that are heavily involved in these games and the scene itself. And you know, it's it's hard to say this the right way, but there's a love-hate relationship with esports,
Mm,
with, these companies and stuff like that coming in, or even publishers, because you have all these people doing a lot of work over the years, and you have some of these companies coming in and saying, "Okay, well, now we're gonna take over and, mess with your hard work and claim it as our own," and stuff like that. Like, "Oh, this is mine now," and it's like, we just did all this work on our back, spent our money because in the FGC, I gotta be honest for people out there that don't know, you don't make a lot of money. Just gonna be real. We're not we're very niche. We don't have gigantic prize pools like Overwatch and other games like that, like Counter-Strike. We are smaller in terms of audience, and we're slowly building up, slowly but surely. But we don't have the funds and things like that comparatively. We really like if you see like the TOs for a lot of locals and stuff like that, they're usually paying it out of their own pockets. Or even bigger tournaments, it's you're breaking even, maybe spending some money sometimes. Maybe they're making some money, but they have to pull in sponsors and everything has to be just meticulously calculated. And it's very difficult. It's very
mhm,
stressful. So when you see corporations come in, people get really wary because you don't know their intentions. You don't know what they're trying to do. You don't know what they might do later on. They might support a tournament or a game and then just bounce, right?
yeah,
So you don't want to lean on them too much, but you kind of want to because that may be the difference between you having a small tournament in a bigger venue, or a better broadcast, or being able to hire, talent, or pay out players and things like that for exhibitions. So it's a love-hate relationship, because you have these good publishers and these good companies that do come in and do some great work, and then you have some weird decisions from them and some weird companies, and you also have people that prey upon the idea of esports too, because we don't have money. There are people who maybe like the idea of being on a part of a team, like an esports team. Like, that's a dream for a lot of players, is to be part of an esports team, be paid to play, maybe have to make content here and there, but like for the most part, they want to sit down and press buttons and get paid. And that's like the dream for a lot of people. Unfortunately, there are teams out there that like take advantage of that. And we actually recently had a blow up a couple years ago, where it was, maybe it was 2 years ago, I'm not sure. Time is not a factor in my mind right now because of COVID. But one of the teams had came in and just hired a bunch of people, and it turned out it was kind of a pyramid scheme where
Mm,
they would force people to buy their own jerseys and stuff like that, and then give that money to people at the top. So a lot of this happens, and it makes people very wary of esports teams and all the stuff like that. It makes these grassroots people in the FGC, if not all, a lot of us, just being like, man, do you really care about us?
yeah.
So there's a really difficult balance, and I do feel like it's better that we are, you know, run by mostly the FGC itself.
Mhm.
Like production and everything like that at the helm, making decisions and stuff like that. I think it's better. In a perfect world, you would have the FGC being able to be as grassroots as possible, being able to be as open as possible, as fun as possible, and ourselves as possible, while still having some of those sponsors come in, and those publishers come in and help us out without minimal, micromanagement and stuff like that. Um, Part of that, actually going back into my commentary, this is the reason why like I do commentary, because I want to keep that rawness. I want to keep that hype, and I don't want to be, in my own words, like a librarian. I don't want to be like really quiet, like, no, he got the hit. Ooh, nice. Because like fighting games are so explosive. They're so fun, they're so energetic, and I want to convey that. And if I'm not able to do that, then what's the point of even talking about fighting games?
Yeah.
Boring.
Yep. I think Overwatch is my go-to example for something that was kind of pushed more like suit and tie. That's what I call
Hmm.
it. And then they've had to pull back a little bit. But DJ Weed, I interviewed him a couple episodes ago, and he gave fighting games specifically like a lot of credit for you guys kind of sticking to your guns as far as like beginning esports kind of was known as the grassroots esports scene. Um, Now it's interesting you talk about those teams because that just sparked a familiar memory in my mind. StarCraft 2 kind of went through the same thing back when StarCraft 2 was released in
Hmm.
2010. A ton of teams came and then they were like, we have tons of money. Don't ask how. And then they actually ended up ghosting a ton of people. And there
Oof.
was a little hesitation when that kind of mini bubble burst. It was like teams, money, sponsors, awesome. And then everyone ghosted me. And it was a little like, okay, we need to be more careful, guys. But I don't
Hmm.
think that we had any as you say, like love-hate relationship. And to me, what that would maybe be because Brood War and the grassroots community that kind of came into StarCraft 2 that did actually accept StarCraft 2, which is a whole nother topic. But they had a new sequel, right? That they could either latch on to or kind of excuse and say, look, that's a different part of things.
Right.
What I'm trying to get to is that do you think that fighting game communities that one day perhaps the next Street Fighter game, right, could actually be what kind of leads more so to the onset of the publisher taking control and the developer taking control and would actually be kind of considered like okay, or do you think that because I guess fighting games are so used to having new iterations all the time, you guys
Mhm.
mostly would just want to stay grassroots?
We want to say grassroots. I don't want to have to put the suit and tie on. I'm gonna be 100%. When I go into commentary, I want to be goofy. In fact, we were at Capcom Cup recently, a couple weeks ago, or I should say Capcom Season Finals, because we didn't have a Capcom Cup. We had Season Finals as a celebration, and we had sponsors. We had Arby's,
Mm,
and we had like Get Gooder and things like that. We were just goofing around. They gave us an Arby's jacket to wear, and I take it on and off randomly and stuff like that. We'd make fun of what we had in a joking manner, obviously for the sponsors and stuff like that. And like, I don't want to get in a position where we have to like do ad reads where, thank you, Arby's, so much for giving money to the Capcom Pro Tour. Like, I really don't want to get into like that area. And I understand there's are benefits to having these publishers take control, but I think the benefits of the FGC being able to, rule everything, be able to control everything because they know what to do is a way better shot. And to be honest, I feel like if publishers were taking control, you wouldn't see the risk that you usually do in terms of, what tournaments are run, who you put on the mic
Mm.
and production crew and stuff like that. These different sort of flavors and stuff like that, because you have to have that perspective of what the people want in the scene and also what brings people into the scene. And I don't know, at least for fighting games, if they can grasp that on their own. It may be different for other games, but for fighting games, I think you have to have that that FGC experience, that FGC flavor. Like if you don't have that, then you just don't have an FGC event.
Yeah, it's very inauthentic, is what could end up happening. And I think on the
Hmm.
publisher side of things too, I mean, they might see this as a very like beneficial, what's it called when it's not like parasitic, but when you both like benefit from the host and like the thing. Like I think they actually see it perhaps as a better way to go after witnessing failures,
Yeah,
such as Blizzard and to an extent Overwatch. Not that it's actually a failure, but anyways,
yeah.
the
I've seen some
pitfalls.
stuff.
Yeah, the pitfalls that exist. We can just put it that way.
Hmm.
So like, I could see I personally would see the fighting game continuing on exactly like it is because you guys are still gaining momentum, getting steam. It feels like when you do put on something kind of big and a lot of attention is drawn to it, you see pretty big spikes in numbers. I don't
Hmm.
think we're talking about a scene that 200 on a daily basis and then 1,000 if it's lucky. Like absolutely not. Evo draws in huge numbers. People really pay attention to it. Um, so with that said, and you even brought it up too, getting the new community in, right? Getting the casual people to come in here. How much do you, as a commentator, focus on that? And let's say that for instance, you're casting at Evo and you know that there's going to be more eyes on you. Are you
Hmm.
really just trying to express the enthusiasm and get people kind of caught up in the emotions, or do you do any changes in your actual commentary about the game? Dumb it down, if you will.
There are slight things I might do. I might focus on more beginner friendly things depending on the event. But for the most part, I am who I am everywhere. The way I commentate locals is the way I commentate at Capcom events or official events and stuff like that. Maybe a few less curse words here and there and stuff like that. Maybe a little bit less wild. Maybe I won't look at the chat all the time and stuff like that. But I definitely am the same person that I am everywhere. And that's to keep giving off that vibe of like, I want when I commentate for people to for it to be like we're all watching the fighting game together, hanging out at a local. I want people to not feel like they're like, in the chat just, watching it. I want them to feel like we're all right beside each other, hanging out, having fun. And I think that does a really good job of bringing people in. And like I'm just actually enthusiastic about a lot of stuff. Like I'm just like a enthusiastic person. Like I love fighting games in general, so I'm always popping off. I'm always loud. I'm always hype. There was a moment during the Capcom Cup or Capcom Finals recently where they showed off Street Fighter 6 and they clipped me like just banging the table and just jumping up and down, going getting hype. And people are like, "Why are you getting hype for a game that was obviously going to be announced?" I'm like, "Because that's Street Fighter 6. That's a new iteration of a game that I want to see, and that means more cool stuff." Like I wanted to see a confirmation because you never know. Maybe they'll announce something that wasn't Street Fighter 6. They could have announced like Resident Evil at the event. I don't know. But like I'm just a naturally like enthusiastic person and that draws in people. Like when I first did the CPT, one of the things that I got a lot compliments for was like people were like, I don't even watch this game, but I'll watch it because you're hype and you're energetic, and that gets me energetic. And I wanna keep conveying that. I wanna keep having people brought in, even if they don't know the game, I want them to pay attention. I do not want people to turn off the stream at all. I don't want people to just walk away and say, "Oh, this commentary is boring. I'm bored." I want the players to look like they're giants, the titans that they are, and I want people to pay attention, and I don't have to fake the funk when it comes to that. I'm just always, like, excited. I'm always just trying to find new ways to convey that, but that's just a natural thing for me.
Would you say that you are, I guess, your approach is common amongst your peers?
Yes and no. There are different types of commentators in the FGC. You
Mm,
have kind of the hype people, the color commentary, and you kind of have the more technical side of things. Um, I think for the ones that are like, I think it's common, but everyone's got a different flavor. And like my style like is something that no one else can have in the same way that no one else can have anyone else's style. when they Yipes or Tasty Steve or whatever. It's just different. The hype commentary itself is pretty common, but what I do in terms of how I convey my hype is something that you only gonna get. Say it's the only flavor you're gonna get is SaintCola. You know what I'm saying? Like that's only me. But that's what's so cool about commentators is that in the FGC, everyone's got their different flavor. Everyone's so different and unique. And some people, maybe they're new and they're just starting out. They don't have a way to access that just yet. And for a lot of commentators, they'll start and be like, "Man, I just want to be just like Yipes," and they'll take his lines and his words, and it's like you don't want to be like Yipes. You need to be yourself because if you're yourself, it's going to be way more entertaining, energetic, and seeing that difference in commentators means that there's something for everybody when they're watching. If some people don't like me, that's cool. You've got 7, 8 other giant commentators out there, even more than that, maybe actually, that are just as good, that just or have a different sort of flavor. So there's always something new people can enjoy.
Very rarely do you have anyone asking for a slightly worse version of X person, right? Like it just
Yeah,
doesn't really exist. So being
dollar store.
yeah, the dollar store version of St. Cola. Yeah, it's just not really going to happen. And they're going to be like massively worse too if they really are trying to replicate someone. It doesn't come off
Mhm.
well. But so yeah, because I was thinking, I asked it, with a little bit of knowledge myself that when I do tune into, I like Street Fighter and I like Dragon Ball actually quite a bit.
Nice.
But and I'm mostly used to just preparing to hear about the hype. And,
Mhm.
the analytical side of things is kind of actually far and few in between. Not because I don't think you guys know your stuff, but the way that fighting games demand you to cast. So when you bring up that there's a couple of analytical guys and there's, slower paced guys. Um, ha- do you have you ever tried to do that? Have you ever tried to be that side of things in a cast, just kind of see how it goes? And how does it
Mm.
work with such a fast paced esport?
So what I typically do to give information to the people, like I still try to get the analytical side. I just hide it really well. It's like, like you give your dog a pill, but you gotta put some peanut butter on it and stuff like that. You gotta hide it with the cheese. I did that recently for my dog Odin. But anyway, you have to kind of hide it so people don't notice that they're learning. Because if they notice that they're learning, they don't like that. If you are an outsider and someone starts mentioning frame data and oh, this is minus, this is plus, and stuff like that, in their mind, they're like, bro, I'm already done listening. I'm not trying to learn. I'm just trying to see the fights. So you have to kind of hide it by saying, he could have done this cool thing, or this is why this is cool. Like maybe you start with the hype and you like use that as your climax, and then people are caught like that, and then you lead down with it and then start explaining with it. Sometimes it just you have pairings that allow you to do that better. Like for me, if I'm usually paired up with someone that's more analytical, so they can kind of ride that wave. Like I'll bring it up and bring that to the climax right there, and I'll kind of pass it off to them, and I actually have a friend named Dynamite Dan who is actually really good. I think he's one of the best analytical commentators because his voice and his flow and the things that he says, and the way that he says things is so approachable that you're listening regardless. Even if it is frame data and stuff like that, you are listening regardless. And there are moments where we do get to do more analytical stuff, like during the Intel World Open, we were able to switch off and do like, oh, this is plus and this is minus with the little board, which is actually super sick. I've never done that before. It's fun. So there are moments we get to be analytical, but FGC is really good about not only just me, but a lot of people are really good about hiding that information and making it digestible. In the heat of the moment in the match, it's very hard to really point out what's going on all the time, especially depending on the event. But the FTC is really good about hiding that data and making it approachable. And I feel like we've gotten better over the years because we realize that we need to pull more people in. We don't need to if there's a fighting game player that's listening, they know probably what's going on. They might not know like the cool intricacies of like a setup or whatever, but they know a good portion of what's going on. The people outside have no idea. So
Hmm,
you have to entertain the people, bring them in, and then give them that information and kind of feed it to them that way.
yeah. It's a good way of putting it. I liked your initial analogy, kind of surrounding the pill and the peanut butter. And I think that fighting games, what you guys do have, from what I've limited research here, but you guys seem to, bring the hype. You bring in that kind of like, fit it in when you can type of analysis in the cast. But then you also have a plethora of actual like content creators, which I think is
Mm.
also insanely beneficial. Again, My most common reference is StarCraft for a reason, but here we go. In StarCraft
Classic.
2, it feels like, our content creators kind of all fit into a certain type of narrow zone. So we don't have perhaps a lot of, for instance, very in-depth, like long form content. But nor do we have like top 10 plays from StarCraft 2 either. But I feel like fighting games, there's no end. Like everyone can make something really exciting. So I know that I actually got to meet Corey Gaming. And
Ooh,
yeah, he was,
Harold.
very, nice, nerdy guy, right?
Yeah.
But I watched his videos and I was like, oh, this is so interesting. Like, oh. So obviously if you do kind of get that pill unknowingly shoved down your throat and you're like, that was kind of interesting. I
Yeah.
feel like there's so many places um, that you can go look. Do you find that a lot of the tournaments actually bring in that kind of outside influence? Do they bring in maybe some content creators or like kind of point the directions here and there? Because I know that's like what esports seems to be missing as a whole, and I'm just wondering about the fighting game community.
You're actually right on that. You know what's funny is that we didn't, as the FGC, really start pushing for more content. It's like the last couple of years. The players themselves, the top players, they don't want to do content. They want to just travel and play, and that's
Classic.
that's all right. That's okay. It makes sense. Like you want to focus on what you're doing, but to build a bigger community, we need to have that content. And COVID kind of forced the hands of many players. Now many of them are streaming. They're
Hmm.
making YouTube videos and things like that. I actually work on Panda. I'm part of Team Panda out here. Um, and we really focus on like bringing in people outside the scene into the scene with like fun videos and things like that. And, like having like a lot of variety and stuff like that. But that content push was not until very recently. And
Oh.
um, I feel like we've had content, but in terms of it being focused and, done correctly, like and as much as people don't like pandas, shocked faces and stuff like that, they don't like the pog faces and stuff and top 10 lists, like that. You have to do that. You have to play the algorithm. And now a lot of the fighting game the community just in general for content, they're a lot more savvy in what they do. They're a lot more savvy in like, okay, I actually have to figure out like how to truncate this video that was like 45 minutes long about a character's move into maybe 8 so that's actually digestible and watchable. I have to put a little bit more behind it. And 4A gaming is probably one of the best channels that like land on the blueprint, but it took so long for people to be like, this is what I need to do with my content. We have good people like Brian F, who is probably one of the best Street Fighter 5 content creators, if not one of the best in the FGC. He always has some fantastic videos that, again, people that don't even watch Street Fighter 5, they'll watch his videos, and he's crafted very good content based on tutorials, how to play fighting games, a mindset, a lot of stuff. It makes it very entertaining. He's just like a naturally entertaining person too, just in general. So it helps out. But that content push was in terms of making good content wasn't until recent. But I'm glad it's happening because tournaments themselves, you can't unfortunately put down a tournament expect it to drive the numbers for the FGC. You have to have more than that. You have to have content to keep pulling people in when there's not a tournament or there's not something interesting going on. Maybe you have to have content to fully explain the storylines that are going on. Maybe you have to have content made from the FGC because people outside the FGC they may see something and be like, "That's cool," but they might miss things. They might not catch things. They might not see things until maybe it's too late. Like I love that people are covering, for example, Arson Ash at Evo and the rise of Pakistan in the Tekken community. But I feel like if we had better content in the FTC, maybe that could have not been such a big surprise. So now, current day, we've gotten a lot better, obviously forced by COVID, but it didn't used to be like that.
Oh. Yeah, I actually had no idea. I didn't know I was gonna get such an interesting answer, to be honest. But that's fascinating to hear about. Another again weird bonus to online era stuff.
Mm,
But yeah, now I feel like I don't. I yeah, I feel like it's super accessible. Can find any kind of anything that I want. Character breakdowns, the pixel
yep.
breakdowns. I can learn what frame rates are, all types of stuff. So that's a cool addition. I would hope that like tournament organizers or in all esports actually do take that opportunity to highlight some of their better and more consistent content creators too, to
Mhm.
have that kind of almost like not an off ramp, but like an additional right, like, it all comes together into hoping that you bring people back, and, like, the
Yeah.
first thing that you see is the pretty lights, the commentary being super hype and all that. But if you ever want to like stick around, you want to probably learn some more. So awesome to
Yeah,
hear that
I mean,
that's changing.
to be honest, the TOs have gotten really good about that. And they've always been supportive of the content and stuff and things like that. But I feel like there's a better push to like converge those two worlds recently. Even for like Arc, Revo, we recently were helping out, Arc Revo and stuff like that. Some of the Panda players would stream the Arc event with their own people. So it's just like, we're getting there where we're starting to converge everything. And again, that's the FGC way, just making more and more of a community. And it's not like it wasn't like that before with the TOs and things like that, but it's even more so now because we're moving to more content.
Neat. Yeah, that sounds great. And I actually watched a video that you did with your team before we jumped on call. It was like you guys reacting to a new character in Guilty Gear.
Yeah.
But it was, it was well done YouTube content, right? Like they took all the
Mhm.
snippets, they added some effects, and then made it sound like it was this like super awesome thing. Um, like and I didn't know anything about it. Guilty Gear, I know what Guilty Gear is, but not too much into it. And I was like, oh,
Yeah.
it's actually really exciting. Good stuff. Bringing it back to your specific commentary journey again. You mentioned that it sounds like you kind of had a very fast bringing up in the esports world. I know you're saying that like fighting games doesn't necessarily pay that much, and with so
Mhm.
many things happening, it's hard to perhaps say that you're a mainstay commentator. But when you did do, as you said, like your first big event, that Red Bull event, right? And you first met like all these people that you were watching. Was there anyone who like mentored you in any way, or did you find yourself kind of picking up on things, having been like now in the action, that you had to reevaluate how you were casting?
Um, I actually had a lot of mentors, to be honest,
Hmm.
throughout the years. Like, even though my ascent was like super fast, part of it's because I had a lot of like I had a really good support group. So Geoff, sorry, my bad. Jeff. Sorry, it's like super early for me. So
Love it.
Jeff, my boy Jeff, actually, he hit me up for this thing called Ronin Rumble, and he really put me onto this game. Like, let me commentate this game called Rambling,
Mm.
and he let me really practice my craft on that. He was very supportive. Um, I've also had people like Ultra David, like he helped me when I was first beginning to teach me how to not always have the same level of hype, have inflections in my voice and things like that, be able to pull things back to make it a lot more interesting so it's not samey. We had a long conversation with that. Vicious, I have had conversations with that person too as well. Early, I don't even know if he remembers, but it was me and my friend Dynamite Dan, and like we were just for like beginning, and he was talking about his commentary journey. And I was like, man, so this is how you get up. You have to like, really grind this stuff. So he has done so very well. And just many of the commentators, even like recently, even like, even though I've been at, the Capcom Pro Tour and stuff like that, I'll reach out to them for questions or something, or maybe I'll chat with them. Say Jam, obviously, if I go to his chat, he'll, give me information. People like Majin Obama too as well, give me advice of what to do and what not to do. But everybody has been really receptive and giving in terms of, let me help you out. Like, let me give you something to help you to help push you forward. And there's a lot of resources out there too. There's a lot of resources in terms of like what to do, what not to do. So it's not like people can't like if they're starting on their own, they can't like go on YouTube and figure out like, oh, this person's made this template of how to deal with commentary, like Sage Jam stuff. Like he's got a million videos on that. And then lastly, the tournament organizers and my scene have always been behind me. My scene has always been rooting for me, cheering for me, and stuff like that. People in Chicago, the Midwest. I'm sorry, the Midbest, I should say. But people like Rick the Hadome, Callisto, who was actually the first person that allowed me to go on his stream and commentate at a local, really put my talk about messing the mic and other even other tournament organizers right now that have still given me opportunities on the first time I've showed up at their events. Bailey and Tong at CEO recently, with Frosty Fostings, just everybody's been giving me these opportunities, and that's why like it takes a village to raise a commentator, a player, anything in the FGC, right? We're all a family unit. Like you really have the capability as someone in the scene to reach out to people, as long as you're not being weird, you have a capability to reach out to people and say, "Hey, I need some help with this," or "What did you do?" or "How was your drive to get to this point?"
That's awesome to hear. So do you consider it a community that's really I guess working on its commentary, because as a lot of
Mm,
you are not full-time commentators, there might just be like a natural lack of resources or time to worry, on the technical skills and all that stuff. But do you think that just
right.
kind of community effort once again kind of making up for any of the suit and tie approach to it, and that you are striving to make commentary for fighting games better and better?
You know, you mentioned money, you're definitely right. There's not a lot of people that can do this full time. You have to have side hustles. Like, there's many commentators out here that have to like. I for myself, for example, I do writing for Red Bull on the side, and then I work at Panda. Even before this, I used to work at the library too as well. It's just a side job because commentary, you don't know when you're gonna get like a real good paid position. Now,
Mm.
recent 2 years, I haven't done too bad. I'm not gonna lie. Like, I've been very blessed to be able to get in a lot of positions that do pay, but it's very rare. It's only at the top that you start getting that. So, um, as for like, I, I gotta raise. Not to say that people were bad before, didn't take it seriously before, but I feel like last couple of years people are taking it a lot more seriously in
Mhm.
terms of commentary, even if it doesn't always pay. We have a lot of new commentators that have like really stepped up their game. Even when during COVID hit, people maybe kind of saw me say I'm not going to stop, and they're like, I guess I shouldn't stop too. And a lot of new commentators have come up. Dynamite Dino already mentioned him. There's like a ton of just like Flexus. She was a new commentator too as well. Marine, who was at Capcom finals out here too as well. All these like new commentators have come, and maybe they were commentating before, but I feel like their drive is a lot more recently. I'm really happy that we haven't stopped. And again, having the resources and having that openness, giving the people the ability to chat it out. We actually have a Discord for commentators where they can find, places to practice their craft. If there's a open local, they can find one, or if there's like a position or whatever, they can find one. People have questions that can be listed there. So there are a lot of opportunities and chances, and we make sure people are funneled towards those.
Awesome. That is awesome to hear. You guys don't have replays, right? Does any fighting game have a replay system? Like
We do.
that you can pass around and then cast over?
So this is actually a trick of the trade. I guess I could tell the people. I guess I could give them a little hint, maybe, a little bit. But what I do for practice is there are replays that they are in the game, and people will kind of rip those and put on YouTube. So
Ah,
what I'll do is I'll play them and I'll commentate over them just to make sure I'm fresh, up to date. If there's things I don't know, I'll write them down and put a note on it. And I have like this giant Google Doc of characters, system mechanics for Street Fighter, for Guilty Gear, for King of Fighters now. I'm just always filling out for data and things like that. Even though I'm a hype commentator, I still gotta know about the game. So, like, there are replays that we are able to commentate over. And if there's someone out there that is like a beginner commentator, or even if you're like a mid-range commentator, it's always good to find those YouTube clips and just commentate over. Like, you sit in your room and commentate over it like it's like you're at a tournament, and it helps you stay fresh. So when you go to a tournament, you know what to do and you're prepared.
awesome. That's the type of nitty gritty that I like to hear about. So you have a Google Doc that you just like write down. Is this a shared one or
Oh
just
yeah.
yours?
Oh, it's mine because only I can make sense of my scribbles and things like that. Only my random notes and numbers and things like that. I think if I gave that to somebody, they'd actually be a worse commentator. And I've been asked, people are like, yo, let me see. I'm like, you're not gonna, it's only gonna hurt you. It's hieroglyphics.
Yeah, that's I feel that, yeah. I write down things if I am studying, and sometimes I'm impressed with my handwriting being legible. Other
Hmm.
times I'm like, "Oh yeah, let me just tell you what I wrote down
Yeah.
because it's not gonna work."
Just be easier.
Yeah, yeah. But that's awesome. So, also speaking of, I guess, of your particular prep work, when you do get hired for a big event, and it seems like you've been hired for a few recently, based off your Twitter, like, what is your preparation, especially if it's a game, I suppose, that you haven't done so much of recently?
Mm. So this is also another trick for a lot of commentators out there. Play the games that you want to commentate. You got to play the games. I at least put in like 1 or 2 matches per day, and I'll tinker around in training lab or whatever. Maybe sometimes I'll write out something and like, okay, how does this work in training lab? Sometimes I want to see it. And then I play and just experience it, or maybe I'll go to like the Twitch and the Twitters and things like that, see what the community's talking about and stay up to date. I'm not the best. In fact, I am average. In some games, I'm actually below average, but I do play the games a lot, and it helps to keep myself, ready and prepared. Like, there's a King of Fighters tournament coming up, and I've been just grinding King of Fighters in the background, like playing a bunch of matches and things like that. Practicing the lab, trying out the characters and stuff. Like, even though it's a new game and I've already been taking down notes on what I've been playing, and then I'll go to streams and ask questions to top players and say, "Hey, what do you think about this? What's this meta? What's this move? Yada yada." Or I'll watch different videos and things like that. There's many ways to like stay fresh, even if you aren't always playing, because you do have to have time to practice, to learn stuff, learn what's going on, and get ready also outside of just commentary for the games, but also hosting duties and things like that. So when I get an event, I'm already kind of prepared because I'm already playing. I'm already, in that mode of doing stuff. And so when an event comes, the only preparation I have to do really is who's playing, what's the event, what's the tonality with it, like what's the tonage and stuff like that. How far can I get wild? You know what I'm saying? And just if it's a game like for this weekend, for example, for the Street Fighter 5 Japan Open, that's happening this weekend, actually tomorrow. It's gonna be a lot of action. It's like 9 hours plus of Street Fighter 5 action, which is gonna be a lot of work, but I can't wait to do it. But what I do is I'll maybe focus on a game like Street Fighter a little bit more than I would maybe focus on other games. So I'd shift focus a little bit because juggling 3 games is hard. It's hard enough playing 3 games. Now juggling games for commentary, put on top of that to be, decent at that, and not only that, be consistent because the jobs stuff like that rolling in, it takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of work. So I'll shift like this week. I shifted my focus a lot to Street Fighter 5 and really just kind of learned a lot about that, a lot more what the players are coming through, maybe the storylines too as well. So I have more talking points and things like that. Some of that's just natural because I've already been keeping up with it, but sometimes you need a refresher. I pull out my Google Doc, and then once the event is over, I erase that doc. I go to the next one. I get about I should say maybe like a 2 weeks notice at the very least in terms of like when I'm notified about an event. Sometimes it's a month. If I'm really lucky, it's months in advance. For the Poland event, it was a month and a half, I believe, that I knew. And for the season finals, it was, I believe, 2 months. So when I prep like that, it really helps. It's like, thank God I can spend more time getting ready. But because I'm so involved in everything already, I don't have to do too much outside of what is going on for the event itself and the storylines and stuff like that.
Mm,
Besides that, it's not too bad.
yeah. Familiar story here for the very limited notice of esports events. It's trademark for esports stuff. But yeah, sounds like you have a really good uh work flow. There we go, workflow. You mentioned having to or going into the pro players streams, and that sparked a question for me. Is what is the community interaction with casters? I hear that and I'm like, oh, aren't you a little concerned that someone would see Saint Cola asking someone perhaps a obvious question and they'd be like, does this guy know anything?
Yeah.
And it's just like, I just, maybe overall, yeah, how does the community interact with the commentators? Are you guys less or more important than the players? Which I know is a bit of a loaded question, but some esports do put more emphasis on their entertainers. But yeah, just what are your views on it?
I think I guess I'll answer that one first. I think we're less important, and that's okay because it's really about the players at the end of the day. Like it's really about them. It's really about their work and what they do, what they provide. Well, the players, what are we commentating? Nothing at all. We're going to commentate CPU matches. That's boring as heck. So it's really the bigger focus is on them. I think in some aspects, maybe for payment and stuff like that, depending on the event, it's better for commentators. That's why I do what I do instead of playing because a little more money sometimes. But jokingly aside, it is maybe more focused on the players, and that's fine. Now, talking to players, we do that consistently. Those are like friends to us. Heck, I'm in a team with like the best Street Fighter 5 player in the world, and I'm willing to, talk mess to him and stuff like that, and hang out on the stream, ask questions and stuff. But when he gets in the match, if he dies, he dies. Like doesn't matter if they're your homie, someone you've known for a long time, all that stuff. It doesn't matter when they start playing. You shift to that mode where it's like, hey, I just want to see some good action. I don't care who wins or loses. I just want to see some good action. But we as commentators, at least at the top level, and I think it's a good idea. Sometimes maybe not so much to get too personal, but it's a good idea to talk with these players a lot, to get to hang out with them a bit, see what they're going through. You might never know, maybe they'll have a new main character that they're playing. Maybe they're having new strategy and stuff
Mm,
like that. And even though you're asking these questions, sometimes there might be obvious. Like I would rather ask an obvious stupid question than not get an answer and not know it on commentary at all. Like that is so important to Even if I don't know if something's minus or plus, I'd rather ask that and get the knowledge and look like a fool for that moment than look like a big idiot on, the big time. So I'd rather just, do that right there and get it over with because commentators can't know everything. The fighting games are loaded with tons of things that, even for Street Fighter Five, that game's been out for over half a decade. There are still so many things learning that we're learning about the game that have nothing to do with like the new patches and stuff like that. It's like, oh, this new thing and this new interaction and all this stuff like that. Like, it's hard to keep up with everything. So you have to go to these top players and ask them. Now, they're not always right. Sometimes they come from bias. So you gotta be kind of wary of that. But I think it's important for commentators to have that rapport back and forth with the top players, and not even just top players, all the players in their scenes and stuff like that. Like, all these players, even if you don't see them at like top eights, top 16s, and stuff like that, it's good to know the player base in general because you need to know who's in the scene, who's doing stuff. Maybe, they may not be the best player, but maybe they'll make an upset someday. So it's good to have all that knowledge.
Mhm. Yeah. I think that's generally a good like feature of esports is that we're very connected to the players. I
Hmm.
know some other esports do a better job of kind of having someone to collect these thoughts and opinions, which is always nice. But from my perspective, my limited research again, it seems like even upwards to League of Legends, those guys are still like talking to the players, even though they have this whole network of people trying to make the show great.
Right.
So that's yeah, definitely important. But then yeah, again, the question about the community, do you ever feel like you're trying to focus in and like, feel like what the secret of what the community really wants? Or is that kind of a non-factor and you're more so just kind of looking at the reaction at the time of you doing something cool, right? So do you read Twitch chat? Do you have Reddits that you follow? Are there other forums that I don't know about for fighting games?
I definitely scoop on a lot of forums. Maybe not so much as I used to now, but I'll definitely be on the Reddits and things like that, other little tiny forums for fighting games and stuff. I'm definitely in the Twitch chats for a lot of fighting game players. In fact, I was just watching a Street Fighter Five player named Infectious recently, like right before this broadcast. Before that, actually a Chicago homie named Stack Bradford. I was watching that too before that. So like I'm always in Twitch chats hanging out. And even if I'm commentating, depending on the event, I will look at the Twitch chat and maybe talk to them a bit. Like if it's like a local, like a mid-size event, and we have it right beside us, I'll like, hey, what's going on? Sephiroth XX out here. Like, hope you're having a good time or whatever. Or I see what you said about my hair. Take that back, or I'll have you banned. No, I'm just kidding. But like, I like interacting with the Twitch, and I do think that they like people can give you good information. Obviously, sometimes they're players that may not know everything, but it's good to have that rapport with the Twitch, talking with them, and
Hmm.
it's good to read what's going on and keep your pulse on it. Honestly, I don't have to do too much work with that, even outside of reading the forums and the Twitch and stuff like that, because I'm just already a part of the community. I'm already in the trenches with them. You know what I'm saying? Like, if something happens on Twitter, I follow so many people that I'm gonna see it no matter what. Like, it's gonna come up my timeline, even if I don't want it to. But if there's like a big blow up or some drama, I get to see it firsthand. I'm like, dang, all right, well, here we go. So that's just how it is in the fighting game, like community. Like to be a good commentator, you have to be entrenched in the scene. You have to be part of the scene. You have to be down the trenches. Like, I don't like when I go to like tournaments, like just hiding in the back away from everybody. I like walking around talking to people. I like just meeting people. I love meeting people. I love talking to, I don't care if you're a top player or a small time player, your first time at the scene. Like, and heck, this is anybody watching. If you see me at a tournament, please come up and talk to me. Please say hi. I love meeting new people. I love learning new things. That's like the best part of fighting games. Just meeting new people around the world and stuff. Like it's so great. So I hate just sitting in the back, just like, no, ready for game time. I love being a part of just walking around. A lot of fighting game players and community members do that.
Hmm.
Like you see a lot of commentators, like Yipes and them walk around talking to people. A lot of top players will do that too. They'll talk with people. They'll talk with top players or even newbies that are going 0 and 2 and stuff like that. It doesn't matter. That's just how the community is.
Yeah. You always have your finger on the pulse, the community wants. But being, just always interacting with them. So when it comes to feedback, do you guys do you in particular, I suppose,
Mhm.
do a lot of like feedback sessions? Do you watch your own VODs? Do you bring VODs to your peers or just think about it after it's all done?
You know, I may be different than other people, but I don't do that at all. I watch my VODs back, and
Mm,
I'll take notes on what I need to do, and sometimes I'll take notes, like, in between, like, if there is, like, an event where like we have a break, I'll just write something down and say, "Oh, I probably should have said this," or maybe I'll flip to my notes, whatever. Oh, I should get this story in. But I really, in this is your mileage may vary kind of thing for fighting game commentators. So don't y'all don't quote me on this. I rarely listen to what people say about my commentary because unless it's somebody like it's my peer, right? Like if I ask them a question or whatever and they give me answers, but I feel like I'm at the point where I know what I need to do to get better, where I my path is and where my strengths are. I know where I need to access that. So um anyone outside is just gonna alter that course. When I began doing commentary, I remember one of the weirdos in the chat was like, "Oh, he's too loud, he's too aggressive, and all this stuff like that." If I would have changed from that comment, if I would have changed from that or any of the other weirdo comments, I would not be where I'm at all. I would be not getting gigs. I would not be, myself, more importantly, and I wouldn't be having fun if I was quiet or not as hype or whatever, to appease a few people. And that's the thing about commentary is that if you're on the outside, like people like will maybe like pinpoint like, oh, you said a mistake, like that wasn't minus or whatever, but they're sitting in the stands. They're not doing this in the heat of the moment, trying to be entertaining and all this other stuff. So it's hard for them to understand how difficult it is to be all these good things on commentary, be on point, and in the split seconds, and keep that going for hours upon hours. Like it's a very difficult job. And people, when they give that advice, it's that armchair position where, and yeah, I would do that, but if you could do that, why aren't you in that seat? You know what I'm saying? So I don't usually take advice. That isn't to say other people shouldn't, and that's to say it's not a good idea. But me personally, I know what I need to do to get better. I practice those things. I get better at those things. And I try to evolve and never be the same every single year. I try to have something new every single year. So at one point, I was definitely taking a lot of advice, and it got to the point where it was like, I'm going to change what I want to do in commentary. Then what's the point? I just would rather go with what I am. And if I fail, I fail. If I don't, I don't. And it worked out.
Yeah, worked out really well by the looks of things. Yeah, I spoke to my soul there for a second with the whole like guy in the crowd being like, "That was wrong. You said one wrong
Ugh.
thing." And it's like, yeah, had that happen recently. And it's like, you're right, I was probably wrong, but like, holy shit, dude! Like, I was casting 12 hours, and we were all just trying to be hype when we're like super tired. Like,
Hmm.
ay, ay, ay.
They don't know that. Oh, they
Yeah,
have no idea.
yeah. But we gotta start wrapping up. It's been over an hour
Ooh.
having a fun conversation about fighting games. But I do have one Patreon question for you from a big fighting game fan. But what are the subtle differences when commentating different fighting games that people might not know?
This was difficult because it depends on the commentator, I feel like. Some games afford you a little bit more time. Like we talked about Dragon Ball recently. And that game during the combos, because they're so long, it gives you a little bit more time to kind of like talk about things or bring things up. So as a commentator, you have to notice that. Are there a lot of break moments? How fast are the matches? How quick are things? I think there's a relative time for fighting games. I think everything is pretty relatively in the same bubble, but there are some games that go longer. However, I think there's still enough in that same sphere. There might be some areas of like combos and things like that going a little bit longer where you have to kind of extend that your conversation a little bit. But overall, everything's so quick that it almost doesn't matter at the end of the day. Like it's still everything's so like this. So like adjusting it is actually not too much. You kind of just jump from one fighting game to another. Now, that being said, there are times where, besides just combos, like let's say King of Fighters, right? There are games that go a little bit longer. Like Dragon Ball inherently used to go a lot longer. Like it used to take up a lot of time for people at venues and at big events and stuff like that. You'd be looking at 3 hours plus or whatever, right? For a tournament, for like a top eight. So some games will go longer, so you have to, as a commentator, watch your energy levels and things like that. Like King of Fighters, for example, it's a team-based game now. It's got 3 characters. And these characters and these matches go like really quick, but they have to play a bunch of matches between 3 characters. So it's gonna take longer than a match of Street Fighter Five. So as a commentator, you have to worry about your energy levels, how long you have to talk, possibly, how long you have to fill. So maybe you have to fill a little bit more for those instances for team-based games or things that take a little bit longer. But overall, the general area is pretty similar. That
Mm.
makes sense.
Yeah. I think that's actually, well, something that I learned from this conversation for sure. Because to me, yeah, it actually seems like fighting games you're right, in the same bubble, where you could say like StarCraft is hours, fighting games are minutes, perhaps even seconds occasionally. It's
Mhm.
like it's so much faster. But yeah, there is that subtle difference. I would say subtle difference between the timings of individual fighting games. And that's awesome to hear that you kind of have to, realign a bit your energy levels to I guess work with that. So I think it's exactly what we're going for with that question. Thank you.
Good.
Um and that's going to be the end actually. So give you any shout outs and especially what you're doing next. So this will be released in a couple of weeks. So what's going
Mm.
on with you?
So I want to give big shout outs to the Midwest. I'm sorry, the Midwest that's always been supporting me. My scene out there in Chicago. Much love to everybody like Callisto. I want to give big shouts to all the TOs that have been putting on work, not only but during COVID, but before COVID. Shouts to Rick, the Odo, Bailey. I gotta give love to you too. Tong, Alex Valle, Jimmy, everybody that's been giving me opportunities to be on the mic, all the players that have been helping me out, my team as well, Panda, who's been fantastic in supporting me and never limiting me in my commentary at all, only actually giving me opportunities. So much love to y'all out there. Obviously, my girlfriend and my beautiful son, Odin. Got to give some love to him as well. And of course, if I show my parents this and I don't say it, I'm gonna get in trouble. So love you, mom and dad. There you go.
There it is. Most wholesome shout out done so far. Thank you very much for joining me. It was awesome learning about the fighting game. I was gonna go with Street Fighter, and then StarCraft just came right out. The fighting game community,
Good
especially learning
thing.
more about Street Fighter, which I always found like the more fascinating one. That was the game that my brothers and I played. When we were super young, so it's really awesome to always hear more about it. Thank you to you guys watching there for episode 45 with Saint Cola. As always, the Patreon is patreon.com/ZombieGrub. Big thank you to Shayne for co-producing the podcast and the Patreon supporters, Nick, Vinny, Steven, ET, and Ravi for going the extra mile on that support. Hopefully, I will see you guys back here for episode 46. Bye.